Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of SupplyChainBrain. Welcome to this special presentation, Fueled for Growth, 1440 Foods Supply Chain Transformation Journey, presented by Galt Solutions. Quick reminder, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can, time permitting. So, 1440 Foods, the company behind trusted brands such as Pure Protein, Metrics, Body Fortress, and FITCRUNCH, has rapidly transformed its supply chain. Today, we're going to learn how this renowned brand evolved from a fully outsourced manufacturing model to owning and operating multiple facilities. We'll discuss how 1440 Foods leverages the right mix of people, process, advanced technology, and data to navigate change, connect teams, streamline manufacturing planning, and set the stage for scalable growth. First, let's take a quick look at our agenda today. First, we're going to learn a little bit about 1440 Foods. We'll go into how they're building manufacturing muscle, how they're engaged in continuous innovation, and then finally, we'll move from there into a panel discussion where I have the privilege of asking a few questions of our speaker panel today. And then we'll wrap it up with an audience question and answer session. Again, don't forget to submit your questions by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Jennifer Stark is Director of Planning at 1440 Foods. Jennifer is a seasoned supply chain leader with extensive experience in the food and beverage and consumer packaged goods industries. Prior to joining 1440 Foods, she held supply chain leadership roles at Sabra Dipping Company, where she specialized in demand and supply chain planning, inventory management, and operations strategy. Jennifer also has experience in consumer electronics and retail. And we welcome Justin Seifert, Chief Marketing Officer with Galt Solutions. Justin brings more than 20 years of supply chain specific marketing experience to help simplify complex supply chain concepts, to drive marketing strategies, and connect industry leaders and influencers. He's often found connecting with practitioners to share their stories of innovative supply chain transformation. So with that, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Jennifer Stark. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about 1440 Foods.
Yeah, so thanks, Bob. We're really excited to be here. So we all know that there's 365 days in a year, but off the top of our heads, don't always know that there's 1440 minutes in a day, which is where 1440 gets its name from. We're a sports and active nutrition company that's on a mission to fuel your entire day. We sell protein bars, powders, shakes, and snacks under 4 different brands, as Bob mentioned: Pure Protein, Metrics, Body Fortress, as well as FITCRUNCH, which was newly acquired within the last 6 months. 1440 is currently on a journey to bring some manufacturing in-house while still maintaining co-man relationships, which has led us to a complex supply chain. And something unique to 1440 is that we are a vertically integrated manufacturer in this space, continuing to grow and develop our capabilities. Setting up our in-house manufacturing for the first time has led to a lot of really exciting challenges along the way.
Yeah, and it's clear, Jennifer, I think that you clearly have a lot going on at 1440. And I imagine, as you mentioned, there's a lot of obstacles to building, as the agenda said, that manufacturing muscle. A lot of these obstacles, challenges that have popped up. So you have 3 here that you're identifying. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about some of these?
Yeah, of course. So data has been a challenge, as well as visibility around inventory and data needs. So for data, it's taken us some time to identify what we exactly need and collecting all of that relevant data. We've made sure that we include cross-functional partners like procurement and logistics and manufacturing and IT to ensure that everyone's data needs are met. But the needs have continued to evolve, and we've been able to adapt and adjust based on all of the new information that we're getting that we need from the data side. We also have a few different systems, and having inventory visibility has led to a lot of manual work that needs to be done, but we've seen improvements on that over the last few months. And We've also started to, as you know, bring manufacturing in-house, and maintaining quality is really at the forefront of our minds, and making sure that the quality that customers have come to expect thus far is met.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jen, I think it's really interesting as you're looking at both of these for data and visibility, as we've always talked about data is incredibly important, and there's really no two ways about it. You know, you're talking about the different sources of data that you're bringing in, the different groups that you have to collaborate with on data, that sheer volume and number of sources, they really just continue to rise. And it becomes quite an undertaking to understand which data is most helpful. And I think we always hear that saying, was it a garbage in and garbage out? And I think while that is true to an extent, that phrase has led many organizations to freeze, almost like a deer in the headlights, and frozen to the extent that they don't know what to do, how to approach data, and they end up saying, "Well, we can't do anything until we have all of our data ready." And I think the truth is, and as we go through this presentation, the audience will start to hear more about how the data will never be perfect, and that's kind of a false expectations. And the reality is supply chains are complex organisms, and the key is to determine how much of that right data is needed to get started. The second point you brought up around bringing manufacturing in-house and that as a challenge, it's very interesting because a lot of companies right now, especially, are evaluating their manufacturing strategy, looking if they bring manufacturing in-house, who their co-mans are, where are those co-mans located, or the facilities located, should they make changes, how do they measure the impact of those decisions. Those are all quite interesting challenges, and clearly ones that 1440 Foods is facing. And then this last one that you have here, Jen, is around scaling for future growth. You mentioned on the prior slide your acquisition recently of FITCRUNCH.
Yeah.
Is that kind of in line with what you're talking about here for scaling for future growth? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So with acquiring FITCRUNCH, we also acquired a manufacturing facility at the same time. And that was about 1 year already into this project. And it really opened our eyes into how we need to be flexible and to not only build for our current operations, but keeping future growth in mind.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing with these challenges, and many in our audience are probably facing very similar challenges, is how do you take these and transform them, back to the title of the presentation, but transform them into opportunities that support your ability to scale, to support your future growth. A lot of companies that we work with at John Galt are in those kind of high growth stages, and they've recognized that supply chain can really be that catalyst, that means to help fuel cash flow to support that additional growth, be that by entering into new markets, bringing new innovative products to existing markets, as well as looking at those strategic acquisitions, so that you just touched on. So can you talk a little bit about, how did 1440 start to work through these challenges and change those into opportunities for growth and differentiation?
Yeah, we've really used the analogy of a workout plan. And so starting with the warm-up, about 3 years ago, 1440 implemented Atlas for demand and supply planning. We've been forecasting through the tool. We've been using the inventory recommendations, and we've seen some strong results. So we met with the John Galt team to understand the additional capabilities of Atlas, and decided to go forward with rough cut capacity planning and what if scenario planning. And at the same time have also been then able to expand on our raw material planning. We're working on weekly forecasting versus just monthly forecasting. So it's a really big project and undertaking. We then aligned with all of our cross-functional partners to understand their needs and align on the goals and the scope and timelines for the project that we needed for this implementation. Looked at other technology partners that we have across the company as well to make sure that Atlas can connect with our ERP and other tools, and really wanted to make sure that this implementation works for the broader organization. And then when we got to the design phase, we made sure to include IT and manufacturing and have representation from there to ensure that we were continuing to collaborate and have visibility across the organization, setting up things in specific ways so that they would integrate with other tools that we have, and making sure we really set the standards of what information are we putting into the system. What is our our network design, what does our plant look like, what are the capacity constraints and line speeds, and other integrations to make sure that everything works in tandem.
I know we've talked about this before, Jen, and I absolutely love this slide that you put together. I think it's a great analogy of where you're just getting out of the gate, right, aligning in all the elements of the project. And once you start to come together and you hit your stride, you're running smooth, and then you have that sprint at the end to kind of bring it all together, bring it home, blending the people, the technology, the process, and as we've mentioned, along with the data. Okay, once you've outlined your plan, you have your team all together, what's the next step?
The next step for us was really just continuing to identify what data we needed. We've really learned that you don't need perfect data to start. We were able to revise and update data as we went. We started with some strong assumptions around shelf life or around lead times and MOQs, and use that to just like plug into the system to start seeing how it works, knowing that we could go back and revise later. We worked closely with master data as those needs evolved and made sure that they were able to expand within the ERP system all of the I guess, data points that they need or that they can capture so that we can have that integration as well.
I think we've hit on this point a couple times so far on data. I have a feeling it's going to come up as a common theme throughout, or a common thread, and the challenge that so many have with it. But I think you have great advice here, and that is to start early, right? Don't wait until you need, I'll put kind of air quotes around the word need there, the data, because you're not going to make any friends that way, right? You're last minute, hey, I need this, send it over. It's not going to win you anything. It's just going to delay things. And then back to that challenge of not having perfect data. And we find that many find success when you can start with assumptions, looking at similar attributes to help fill in those gaps. And then as you start to build more, you bring in those additional signals. Those can help you replace those assumptions that you started out with and continue to fill in other gaps that you may have along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Like, for example, originally we didn't think we needed pallet specs. And then when we were going through this project and decided that we need to place POs to our suppliers in truckloads, it became clear that we do need pallet spec information. And so we had to sometimes go back to suppliers. We also were surprised at how sometimes the data we got was inaccurate. There were examples where suppliers would submit information to us on all of the critical MOQs and shelf life and stuff that we needed. We would go to place a PO and they would tell us that the shelf life was actually different, or the MOQ was actually different. So it was really surprising that we couldn't get clean data off the bat, and that we had to keep making sure and revising as we go, even as we place POs. And it also took a lot longer, to your point, to gather some of this information. Some of the response times were really long. And so we've had to, I guess, revise our timelines based on some of this data gathering.
Yeah, and you're talking about not just internally, right? You're talking about external. So that's another key thing, is that it's beyond the four walls when you're starting to look at data that you have to think about.
Exactly. Some of which was out of our control in terms of lead times to get the data.
Yeah, and as you noted, it's not always perfect, which adds some to it. So once you have this data, Jen, and you start working on some of those assumptions, you start cleaning some of that data, how do you start bringing that all into your planning process? What does that look like?
Yeah, so part of our overarching need for this project was to be able to capacity plan. We started with understanding the differences in our lines and how we have the ability to manufacture in multiple facilities, with whether it's co-manufacturing or our own in-house new manufacturing. And so making sure that we have a strong tool who can help us figure out where we should be producing what. And that was clear that was a capability of John Galt with Atlas, and so for the rough cut capacity planning. So we felt that was definitely a capability that we needed and a focus for us. We've been, because of expanding with the rough cut, it's allowed us to add in BOM details that are new to us, and all of that is being passed on to Atlas for us to continue to understand our raw materials and roll up across brands what's needed, since some brands share ingredients and some are unique. And then we're also able to see a consolidation of all of our needs for a particular raw material, some of which goes to different facilities, and we're almost able to place a like bulk order to then have it go to multiple locations.
Yeah, so I can imagine with that additional visibility into the bill of materials, you can understand where you have shared ingredients across your network, where it makes sense to, as you said, purchase in bulk. So I would imagine that's really helped you increase your purchasing power now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really been great to see all of that come together and be able to work with suppliers on contracts, and heavily reliant on the procurement team for that to make sure that we are getting our best pricing, best negotiation, and shortening the lead times, hopefully by giving them more visibility into our needs.
And then I know, Jen, you talked about change management. Can you expand a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a lot of times it's hard to accept change. The timelines and the scope have evolved with this project. And just like in a regular workout, you have to adjust. I think we've been getting comfortable with change since it's happened so much as timelines have shifted.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point. You have to get comfortable with change, whether that's from a change management perspective of new processes, new technology, but as well as embracing the uncertainty and the unknown of what's going to happen, whether it is something happening with a supplier or spikes in demand. There are many things. If there's one thing that's certain in supply chain, it's that things are uncertain, and being comfortable with that and embracing that. And
Exactly.
that probably kind of leans into a little bit on the FITCRUNCH acquisition, right? So that probably sparked quite a bit of change within the organization as well as you brought on an entire new brand.
Yeah, bringing on a new brand as well as a manufacturing facility has just really taught us that you don't have to be perfect to scale and continue to evolve. You can add these kinds of things in the middle of a project, and it's been surprising to see how seamless it's felt to add it. It's almost come off as easier than the original, I think, because we had visibility into what was needed from a data standpoint and what we need to be able to set up all of these tools has made it almost like rinse and repeat and feel easier this time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been great. And the project is really going to be ongoing. It's an evolution. We, despite the two facilities, will continue to collaborate and lean on some co-manufacturing partners. It's going to allow us to have some regional manufacturing as well, which should help with the tariffs, even though this was planned before. And there's also going to be support for new innovations and continuing to launch really exciting new products.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the sense it kind of worked out nicely, considering what's going on with tariffs and everything for you. But as you mentioned, this is, shifts in manufacturing are long-term strategy decisions that require planning, require some time to make happen. And this is clearly something from a 1440 Foods perspective that you were already well underway, and you just happen to be able to also reap the benefits of that, of all the work that you've put in. Given the state of where things are right now. So you mentioned there's still many next steps in your evolution. Can you expand a little bit more on what some of those additional elements are on the roadmap for 1440?
Of course. So rough cut capacity planning, we're still in development with. It's a really exciting endeavor that we've gone on, and seeing it all come together has been great. It's going to be really helpful for us to determine our capacity and to figure out what we need external manufacturing support on, and longer range visibility, especially on those raw materials based on where we're going to produce, when we think we need it, understanding that the forecast continues to change. But I think it'll be really helpful for us to visually see that capacity and that demand or production demand without having to do the manual work in spreadsheets. Next, we're going to be working on the what if and scenario planning, where this should really help us figure out if demand increases, are we going to be able to cover it with our existing inventory? Do we have capacity if we don't have the inventory? When can we support for like promotions that were not planned or planned late, new items, any raw material shortages? All of that kind of stuff should be easy to see with that what if scenario planning. And then throughout this journey, we've also been keeping in mind scalability. And it's great to see how Atlas can help us grow as we grow, especially with that FITCRUNCH acquisition that we just talked about, and being able to see how we can, during a project, add in a manufacturing facility and add in more items, and all of that kind of new network and transportation lanes has been great.
I think that also, it all ties back into some of that what if scenario planning as well, right? So if the beauty of the what if and running scenarios is looking at all the levers that you have at your disposal to make adjustments and do all of that kind of, I'll call it experimentation in a digital world before you go ahead and execute it. And I know a lot of the companies that we talk with, that we work with, they're doing this exact same thing. They, as just kind of commenting around the uncertainty that is out there, and the constant questions of what should I do next? What if this happens? What if a supplier has a challenge? What if a lane goes down? There's always something around the corner. And to be able to model those and figure out what's right, or hey, we want to enter into a new market, right? We want to bring a new product together. We bring a new product to the market. What is that going to do? Do we have the capacity? What do we need to bring on another manufacturing site? Do we need to find another distribution channel? Whatever it may be, but being able to model those digitally before you go out and execute is a real key benefit, and something that's, as I'm sure you're very well aware, Jen, is not really easy to do in Excel.
Yeah, I think I love Excel, but I think we're really excited to have a system to do some of this work and not be as manual.
Yes. I think we're all very used to Excel, but we also recognize that there's
Yeah.
a whole other world out there beyond the spreadsheet. So just kind of speaking of that, moving forward or maybe looking back, what are some of the key lessons that you have learned along this project that the audience can take away?
To start, we've definitely learned you don't have to be perfect to start. And I know that we keep in that the data doesn't have to be perfect, and we keep harping on that, but it's really true that you can just use some assumptions, evolve as the data can evolve as you're going through, and just start. Don't wait.
Yeah, I think we need that on a t-shirt. That's what we need to start doing is we'll put that up against the displays for 1440 Foods products. We'll just start.
That sounds great. You also don't have to be finished to continue to evolve. I think the FITCRUNCH acquisition is a great example of this. We weren't done with the initial ramp up of production and getting systems all set up. And then we took on this added workload and added complexity to our supply chain, but we were able to make it work. And it's been really feels seamless to add. And then collaborating early, I think, is a huge lesson that we've learned. Understanding that each teams have their own needs, and gathering all of that information early on, I think helped us avoid some delays on the project and changing scope and timelines. And technology, it's really there to support, and it's not the enemy. As much as I want to stay in Excel, I think we need to evolve and implement some technology to help us do things quicker.
Yeah, great points. I think there's a balance there, right, between the people, the process, and the technology that we all need to find. And each one of them, it's kind of like the legs of the stool. With all of them in place, you build a much stronger stool than if you started to lose one of them or kind of skimp out on one of them. Back to your data comment again. Fully agree. You need to get started. You need to move forward. And I love that point about you don't have to be finished to continue to evolve. One of the things with supply chains and these types of transformations, they're a journey. Right, and journeys continue to go. As you mentioned, you continue to evolve. There's always somewhere, some way to get better, something else you can do. Because as you mature in one area and you build that muscle up, that then allows you to take on the next step, right, and become even more strategic, and then start to look at additional types of decisions. So you're always evolving. And if you wait for one area to be done, you're never going to continue moving forward. You can do some things in parallel, especially once you've started, and then you can celebrate those successes, celebrate those wins, and get the team motivated. And that drives right back into your collaboration, and getting everybody involved. So I like the way you frame these four elements, and how they all intersect with each other, so to speak, to move everything forward.
Thanks, Justin. It's been a really exciting project. I'm really excited to be expanding on these capabilities that we have within 1440 and working with the John Galt team on it as well.
What an incredible story, and what a bold move on the part of 1440 to take back control of its manufacturing, which is something that makes eminent sense. But boy, there are some certain challenges that come with that. And you've done a great job, Jennifer, of telling us how you dealt with some of that. At this point, let me bring back Jennifer and Justin on camera so you can see their lovely faces, and we can launch into the panel discussion portion of our presentation here. Let me just start out by asking you, Jennifer. You said you don't need perfect data to start. But a lot of companies use that as the reason they can't start an innovation project. Talk more about how you actually did start working without perfect data, because said, well, we could just revise. I'm sure it wasn't quite that easy. And you had so much inaccurate data from your suppliers. How did you proceed?
It really was just starting. Just use the data as a placeholder, make those assumptions, just get something on a piece of paper and run with it. For example, in order to test our FITCRUNCH capacity modeling within the rough cut capacity plan, we had some numbers of assumptions on throughput since the facility is already running, and put those in the system, started to play with it and test it. And then this week I met with someone at the plant to revise those numbers and make sure that we had the right throughputs, re-uploaded them, and it's working the way we expect. And we were able to just very easily update that data and revise it.
Justin, do you see that a lot with regard to the John Galt solution, that companies are able to proceed with imperfect data and then, back it up and revise it later and still come to a successful conclusion?
Yeah, no, we see that quite often where you may have missing data, unavailable data, what have you, or imperfect data. And that's where it goes back, I think I was mentioning earlier, around using assumptions. But you can also look at attributes of similar products. Right. So if you know the market demographics, or the key indicators of how a product sells, or what about that product is it nutrition, is it the packaging, is it the flavors, these types of attributes, you can start to build those together and fill in some of those assumptions in that missing data to help with that. And as Jen mentioned, right, so that at least gets you started. And we see that for food and beverage. You see that in a lot of consumer goods areas, apparel, what have you. But like as Jen mentioned, once you start to use that data and you start the process, you also now have the opportunity to understand what questions to ask down at the plant, right? So if you didn't start, you could ask a series of questions, but they may be the wrong questions. Right. But now you can kind of start to see what are the right questions to ask that'll get me to the decisions that I need to make.
Well, it would make sense that you go to comps like that in order to come up with the data that you may not have perfectly at hand. But Jennifer, you guys made it even more challenging for yourself by bringing in a whole new brand and having to learn about that brand and the data that came with that. At the same time, you had to deal with it. My goodness, that just seemed like it was a huge task. But
yeah, it was almost like we did the project twice.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about that, Jen. I mean, I understand the FITCRUNCH acquisition actually occurred after you had already started the project of bringing in manufacturing. So that wasn't the big revelation that we need to do this. You already were on that journey. So you bring in these guys. How did that support the entire existing project?
Yeah, it just fit in really well because we were starting up our own manufacturing facility for the legacy brands. To bring in another brand as well as a manufacturing facility that came with it at the same time, it worked. It was what we were already trying to do within the systems. We already knew what we needed, what data was needed to be collected. And it almost like we had a head start since we already had all of the peek behind the curtain of what was needed to be able to implement this.
I mean, they didn't just hand you the keys to the FITCRUNCH plant, say, here, it's yours.
Yeah,
You
it was
know?
an external plant for them, and we acquired it at the same
Oh,
time. It was the co-manufacturer for them. So it
hmm.
was totally separate entity as well. So it was two companies being integrated at once. So it was a
Justin,
lot.
did you ever see anything like that in your previous client engagements, or is this a new one for you guys too?
Oh, no, not at all. It's very common. I think M&A is quite a common occurrence. And one of the beauties of it is, yeah, once you have those processes and everything defined, right, it's fairly straightforward on integrating them. And it's not uncommon for some of our customers to have more ERPs than you could shake a stick at, so to speak, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you can see, there's 4 or 5 different ERPs is common. We've seen them upwards of 10 to 12 different ERP systems that are all feeding into our Atlas planning platform to provide that end-to-end visibility. So no, I mean, whether you're a mid-market or a large enterprise, a lot of those challenges are fairly common with multiple systems, acquisitions, or even sometimes a company that today, maybe the last acquisition was 5, 10 years ago, but they still haven't done anything with it. That's still very common too.
Yeah.
So regardless, the different divisions kind of operate independently with those independent systems and the goal is always the same, right? You still want that end-to-end visibility to really be able to make those decisions. So some way you've got to bring all that together.
Yeah, and visibility was a challenge early on for us with all
Yeah.
the different systems. We, within a few months, moved all of the inventory out of the warehouse that FitCrunch was previously using to gain that visibility for finished goods. But we're still having some visibility challenges on the raw materials since those are scattered and not in our
Yeah.
ERP yet.
Feels like kind of like switching in and out rail cars on a train that's going 120 miles an hour.
Yeah.
You know, wow. Okay, so Jennifer, you talked about change management. Obviously, that's going to come into an issue, even when it comes to something like, insourcing, which you would think would be a welcome addition to the organization as opposed to outsourcing, where people are afraid of losing control. And
Right.
yet, it's still a change. You still have people who are going to be resistant no matter what, because they've always done it this way, quote unquote. So,
Yep.
what change management efforts did you actually put into being that supported this whole process?
We started to have biweekly cross-functional meetings to report out on project status, making sure that all stakeholders were aligned, that any support that was needed was called out, any risks to timelines, just to make sure that everyone understood what change was coming and what needed to get done in order to meet the timelines and accomplish this integration and startup of a facility.
And yet, did you in fact run into resistance to change? I mean, I would just imagine that would
Um,
come
of
a little
course,
bit.
there's always people who are going to be more resistant to change. It's always hard to change and to accept that. But we did have strong leadership backing. Of course, with starting up a facility, leadership was totally on board, and so just having that like top-down direction and requirement, you kind of have to adjust and get on board.
Well, Justin, I imagine notwithstanding the value that you bring to an organization with your solution, there's got to be people within that organization who kind of look at you as being the bad guys. Like, but somehow I'm sure you contribute, you help the client get through the change management process because you're so familiar with it, right?
Yeah, and that starts from the very beginning of the engagement, working with each company, each organization, in what that's going to look like. And I think one of the key elements in that Jen alluded to is, or she didn't even allude to, is very direct, strong leadership, right from the very get-go. When you have clear direction and you have the backing of leadership within the organization, it kind of rallies everyone together to move forward because you know that it is an actual company direction that you're moving in. It's not just
Yeah.
an experiment or a test or what have you. So yeah, no, that is something that we work very closely with our clients on is how to identify those processes, what that's going to look like, what the expected benefits are. And then also it goes back to that idea of celebrating those wins. Every single time you do have a milestone, every single time you
Right.
do start to see that success, you celebrate that and you build on that because that building brings that momentum together. And as that comes in, more people start to get excited about it and they want to do more. They want to do the next step of that process.
Sure. Well, Jennifer, I hear you saying that visibility and data insights provided by technology, this has been integral to your journey.
Yeah.
So how did you even begin to identify the strong technology partners that you'd wanted to engage with, and why, for that matter, did you end up staying with Atlas?
Since we had that existing relationship, we asked Atlas for a demo on what Rough Cut can do, what if scenario would look like. We understood that the capabilities of the tool were what we were looking for, and that it was flexible, that we'd be able to set up our network the way we need it, add to the network as we continue to grow. And it just really felt like it was the right tool for us to continue on this journey with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. And Justin, I guess you had to present yourself as being of value and relevance to them going forward. That was your challenge. You know.
Yeah, no, yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's always we're constantly trying to innovate and bring new capabilities to the market, and make supply chain planning systems usable and easy to use and drive that value as quickly as possible. I could probably drone on forever on this topic, I'm sure. But yeah, no, that's one of the things we really do value and appreciate the partnership and the relationship with 1440 Foods and the confidence they have in Atlas to help them continue to expand and evolve and accelerate their supply chain planning.
Okay, so Jennifer, we're talking here in depth about the way you were brought in manufacturing. Again, a great story. But there had to be some other challenges that you faced at 1440 Foods that maybe came as a surprise to you. I mean, nothing ever works out exactly as planned. What might have been some of those challenges and lessons you learned that you weren't entirely prepared for?
That's a great question. I think when I joined the company, coming from, you mentioned Sabra Dipping Company, coming from a refrigerated dip with a short shelf life because it's refrigerated, coming into this organization where it's a shelf stable product, we have months of shelf life, I really thought that we wouldn't have that much excess inventory, that it would be easy to move through, we would just be constantly waiting for more to come in. And I've been surprised at how much excess we have due to the long lead times that we had from our co-manufacturers, due to forecast variability. And so we're really hoping that having this facility helps with some of that lead time, helps with some of that waste so that we can be more flexible. But it was really surprising to me. I came in being like, this has got to be easy. The last place was so much harder with such a short shelf life, and it wasn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Justin, you've seen it all, I'm sure. You've had so many client engagements where you've seen so many different things pop up, but any particular surprises from your end?
Yeah, no, from a 1440 Foods perspective, no, I think it's fairly common challenges from a food nutrition perspective. I kind of joked with Jen earlier about it on the shelf life side of it as well. I think most of the time we don't think about something that we see in a package like that as having an expiration to it, but it does, obviously. So yeah, I mean, one of our things is how do we balance that the demand and supply, and how do we ensure that the inventory is right sized in place where it needs to be? Looking at your raw materials, your manufacturing capacity and the throughput to be able to ensure that you don't have that excess inventory. Right. So that's part of this project, working with them. And as we're extending into the RCCP, and then as we start looking into the scenario planning, being able to continue to further improve the metrics that 1440 Foods is achieving.
Okay, as we point out here, Jennifer, you're still in the process of this transformation. It's still ongoing. Can you just sum up for me, like, what results you've seen so far?
Yeah, so far we've seen, to highlight just one area, I think increased visibility of raw materials and like the understanding of our true needs. Since we weren't planning raw materials previously because of the relationships with external manufacturers, needing to develop all of that and build up on the bombs and what is needed, where and when, has been really great and a great result of this project so far.
I just have to think that direct relationship with your raw materials suppliers had to be just a golden opportunity to achieve more resilience and be able to pivot more, because you're just in contact with them. You don't have someone in the middle who's kind of like, translating between the two of you. So there
Yeah.
has to be a good
It's been a
reason
big
for
project
doing
for
it.
procurement as well.
Yeah. Justin, what do you think? What would you sum up as the benefits to date? I mean, again, not finished, more to come, but just what have you seen? What value do you think you guys brought to the table as of the moment we're speaking now?
Yeah, so again, as 1440 has been working with us, or we've been working with them from a demand and inventory perspective for quite some time now, seeing great results in there, and then taking this into that rough cut capacity planning. But it's really about that driving into that visibility and understanding what capacity you do have, what does demand look like, and how do you start aligning and balancing those two areas. One of the challenges, and you just mentioned it, Bob, right around resilience and being able to kind of as you're bringing that in house and you have that greater visibility into your suppliers, you're starting to compress that lead time and gain more control over it to an extent. But you're also now taking a look at it from the sense of you can react or respond to changes more quickly in it. And when we think about from a resilience perspective, it's balancing how much resilience do you want to put into your supply chain versus kind of understanding that real alignment of demand and supply. Are you kind of that just in time sort of model? But that, from a benefit perspective, it's being able to build that flexibility into the supply chain to weather regardless of what storm may be out there or smooth sailing that there might be available out there, but it's being able to balance that.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys, so much for that. At this point, I would love to bring the audience in because they have a few questions they'd like to ask you as well. So, even as we are answering these, we just have a few minutes to cover this, but if you want to just keep submitting your questions, and we will indeed get to as many of them as we can. I guess this particular question would like you to back up on day one, Jennifer, and just tell us why 1440 Foods decided to start doing its own manufacturing.
I think really for the flexibility, like we've talked about already, of being able to adapt and adjust to the forecast variations, new items or new promotions coming in, and being able to meet those, not having those long lead times, the relationships with suppliers like we just talked about, and competitive advantage, being, I think, one of the only vertically integrated manufacturers in this space. Hopefully gives us that competitive advantage. And now with tariffs, it hopefully is a good thing as well.
Yeah, you look like a genius in retrospect, although, I mean, obviously saw the benefits ahead of you, but now it looks like an even better decision. Maybe some other of your competitors are going to say, I should follow their example. So, okay. Well, thanks for summing that up. This questioner also wants to know, we talked about data, poor data, good data, raw data, whatever. They want to know how you brought in data. What was the input? How did you get access to this data?
Yeah, so our procurement team really did the legwork on this and sent supplier onboarding packets out to all of our suppliers. They were gathering all the relevant information, following up to make sure we were getting the responses, and then consolidated all of that information to pass it on to master data, to then have all of that information get put into the ERP system so that then we could connect it into Atlas. So it's being passed through from the ERP directly into Atlas on a daily update, but it was really procurement going out and farming that data and then having to do it again when we started to integrate with FITCRUNCH as well.
Yeah, but once you get the flow going, though, I mean, you do have the data's moving at that point, but just getting it going, with your middleman out of the picture, there must have been, interesting trying to grab all that at the beginning, and because you didn't have it before. Okay, cool. All right, so this questioner wants to know, what are some of the constraints that you've come across, just in general? I guess it's a pretty general question, and can you just speak broadly to that issue?
Yeah, we keep saying it, but data has been a constraint, and collecting that data, getting proper data, correct, understanding, is it complete yet or not, so that we know to trust it, or is it still sort of being used just for testing? There's been constraints with understanding our lines and the capacity or the differentiations between the lines, bringing on the new facility that came with the acquisition. Their manufacturing capabilities are different than what our original in-house manufacturing facility is or are. So understanding those differences and knowing that we need to set the system up differently has been part of the constraints and just adding to some of the timelines as well.
Yeah.
There's also different packaging types per facility. So there's all those different nuances that we've seen.
Great. This questioner wants to know, Jennifer, what's your favorite of 1440 Foods products?
I really like our Pure Protein Sundae Cone Bar. It just came out like within the last year. It's delicious.
Justin,
That
I'm going to
doesn't
put you on
sound
the
like
spot.
yeah, I was gonna say that doesn't sound like something that should be a good for you type of food. So I'm gonna have to go with that probably because I have a feeling after this webinar today I'm gonna be going to the store to go find that.
You don't crave ice cream after working out?
I think we're all of a sudden
Well,
all feeling very guilty about needing to implement a new workout program
Yeah.
Yep.
with the use of 1440 products, of course, to keep us
Yes.
going. But
Exactly. For every
Yeah.
minute of the day.
Yeah.
yep, that's right. Every 1440.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your insights. I love your story, Jennifer. I love your journey. And Justin, thank you so much for your comments too. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. We have time for one final question. I'm going to start with you, Jen. What was the biggest lesson learned in this initiative? And for those who would like to follow your lead on this, what's the first step they should take on their journey?
I hate to say it again, but data. It doesn't need to be perfect. Start
Yep.
when you can, go with the flow, change as you go, and just start. And to really get started, I would say align on the goals. Make sure that everyone within the organization who needs to be involved understands the timelines, understands the goals, and engage your cross-functional teams. Make sure everyone feels a part of it.
Getting buy-in across the organization has got to be, absolutely crucial. And it sounds like you went ahead and you did that in a proactive way, which helps to explain and partly the success of your initiative to date. Okay, Justin, what do you think? What do you think? I mean, what lesson did you learn, or lesson did you perceive they learned, and what do you think others should do to follow in their footsteps?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's many different aspects to this, and what Jennifer just said is fantastic in that you just need to get started, right? But even more than that, and we've touched on this, is knowing where you want to go. It's having that goal that's out there, and then identifying with that goal in mind, what do you need to support you in getting there? So if you think about it from a data perspective, there's so much out there. And if you're that caught up in having all the data and having it all be perfect, the reality is you just need what you need to achieve that goal. So focus on that. The other thing is understanding that it is a balance and a combination of the right people, process, and technology with that data supporting it. And you need to have, in many cases, I think, technology is evolving at a very rapid pace. There's a lot of innovations that are coming out, and we need to make sure that organizations are ready to take advantage of those, but you don't have to do it all at once. A little bit of a plug here at John Galt, we have the Pathways to Evolve, which is about start, evolve, and accelerate. So starting where you are, and then as you start to evolve your processes and you start to mature and you start to take on some of those additional capabilities, you accelerate your maturity. So you're not trying to boil the ocean all at once. Focus on your goals, celebrate those successes, and build on those as you go through. And as Jen mentioned earlier, we're very proud to partner with 1440 Foods and help them scale and grow as they grow, and have Atlas be that platform that helps them do exactly that.
I'm sure you are definitely on a path of growth, Jennifer. I wish your company the best.
Thank you.
Fantastic insights from both of you. Thank you so much, Jennifer Stark and Justin Seifert, for those great insights, as well as your audience. Thank you for your great questions and for your participation as well. JohnGalt.com is your way to reach this company to help accelerate your supply chain planning decisions. And here's an asset for all of you, a ebook, 7 Keys to Successful Supply Chain Scenario Planning. There is a QR code that you can snap a picture of right now if you are able to in the next few seconds. If you're not, don't worry about it. This will be provided to all attendees of this webinar after it's over, and unfortunately, it is now over. Thank you so much. It was great to have both of you with us today. Everybody, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.